Okay, sounds pretty quiet out there. That's a good thing. Way oh hey oh, way oh hey oh, hey hi I oh, way hi I oh, way oh hey oh, way oh hey oh, hey hi I oh. Good afternoon. My name is Crystal Morris, or Spechia. I'm the daughter of Ethel and Leonard Thomas of Splatzen and Sandy and Debbie Morris of Sartlip. Today I'd like to welcome you to the UBC Learning Circle, Gathering Strength, Voices on Depression and Suicide. And first of all, I'd like to recognize the traditional territory for which my office here in the downtown resides, which is the traditional territory of the Musqueam. And I'd like to do a little bit of housekeeping. Can we make sure all the speakers are off, except for Susan, currently at Carrier Secani for now, Family Services. And the format of the presentation is we're going to start in the north. Now this is really interesting because today's presentation is going way up to the Carrier Secani, up in the north and over to Vancouver Island. And then how we're going to do today's presentation is we're going to start with Susan, and she will take questions at the end, so I will turn it over to her after I do a little bit of housekeeping. I would like to welcome all of you to the circle today. The session is being recorded for educational purposes and for future use for other people who wanted to attend, but the time wasn't convenient. So if you don't want to be recorded, unfortunately, there's really not anything we can do about that. Unfortunately, if you don't want to be recorded, we'll just have to ask you to leave the room, unfortunately. Hopefully everybody's muted your microphones. If you're just joining us, please ensure. Is it muted? Sliaman, can you please mute your microphone? And can you please indicate to us how many participants are in your room? I'll give you opportunity to do that here in a couple seconds. And the reminders to all our Adobe Connects. So today we have about 20 on video conference with others continuing to join us, and I think we have 32 or 28 on Adobe Connect. So we have a really big group today. I want to get through this. If those on Adobe Connect, if you could ensure your microphone and speakers are muted, except for Will when it's your turn up there in Scioto. So our speakers today, I'm very excited to say it's really been nice to reconnect with Susan Armstrong. She's a registered counselor in private practice with Carrier Secani Family Services in Prince George. She has over 20 years experience working as a therapist, clinical supervisor, researcher, and community educator in the field of trauma. Susan has been engaged in assault response teams and community development work in a variety of communities and community settings. She has established a sexual assault response team, written and implemented community-wide sexual assault and suicide protocol prevention, response, and protocols. And our second presenter and lead that I've been in contact is over at Scioto. When it's their turn, Will Morris is going to do the introduction, but William is currently in his 5th year as an elected leader for the Sartlip First Nation. He is also the South Island Hub Coordinator, which is an initiative through which is sponsored by the First Nations Health Authority. He attended Lester B. Pearson College, Camosun College, and the University of Victoria, and recently completed his diploma in language revitalization at the University of Victoria. Will has strong cultural values and beliefs passed on to him from his grandparents and his parents, which influenced his long-term goal of attending law school. Will is the former chairman of the West Saanich School Board that represents the 4 Saanich nations in the field of education. He is a former member of the Canadian Coast Guard, where he worked as the lead hand on a rescue vessel along the BC coast. He is a certified master scuba diver instructor and also holds the distinction of occupational scuba diver. Will has been married for 5 years and has been with his wife for 16. Together they have 2 daughters, Hannah and Layla, and one son named Will. So please, again, if you're just joining the room, please mute your microphones. And right at this point in time, I'm going to actually hand it over to Susan. Susan, welcome to the UBC Learning Circle. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Crystal. In Vanderhoof, yes, it's an honor to be with you again. The piece that I will be speaking about today is about how to implement a suicide prevention and response protocol within communities. And Crystal, I'll encourage and invite you to be my co-presenter, to step in at any time, because the first time I've had the opportunity to do the community-based protocol work twice in my career, and the first time I did that work with Crystal in Splatsing, and the second time it was in the north in Fort St. James. And Crystal, just let me know about at what time should I be ready for questions. Just not sure how we're allotting the time today.
Would you like to take questions throughout? Would you like to take questions at the end? So let's try and speak for about half an hour.
Okay, I can easily do that. Okay. So I do also have a PowerPoint, and I think that if we could bring that up, because some people like to hear and read at the same time.
There we go.
Great. Well, that's me. And we can go to the next slide. And so the first slide, I just thought I would jot down the variety of steps or pieces of action that one needs to be aware of and committed to in order to have an effective protocol in one's community. Obviously, someone has to have the responsibility to actually create the protocol, and with it, you will need risk assessment forms. And we're getting ahead of ourselves, but every protocol actually lays out step by step what responders should be doing if someone is at low risk, medium, and high risk of suicide. And so one needs to have devised a format that's going to help people clearly identify levels of risk. The other necessary piece is that there has to be one coordinator, one hub person. To do it other than that creates too much confusion. And that can vary about who that person is. In the Splatsing example, it was Crystal. And that was, it was Crystal's initiative that we, first of all, have a protocol, but at the time, you were the health director. In Fort St. James, it was me. And what that meant is that one person is holding the responsibility of keeping that protocol fresh in the forefront of people's minds. That person is available, is making sure that the stakeholders are invited to the table.
Can I just comment?
Sure.
So when we looked at the stakeholders, it was more than just, we went outside the band administration. So stakeholders, yes, there was community stakeholders and buy-in at the community level, but it was also the frontline workers at the school, and there was also the RCMP, the ambulance drivers, and the local community health center that were trained in our suicide protocol.
Yeah. And that was true in Fort St. James as well. Actually, we didn't have the ambulance drivers, and but I think that's also because it's a different community setting. You're not transporting people, but we had all that list that you included and including all the, we also had MCFD, and we had any community service agencies. And then the coordinator also, when the protocol is implemented, if there's been any issues about how it was implemented, perhaps it wasn't as smooth as projected, or perhaps the protocol wasn't followed adequately, or appears that way, then the coordinator arranges a debrief with the involved responders, and just to, and it's an opportunity to learn together. It's an opportunity to address any concerns with the protocol, clarify, etc. So that's the coordinator's role. And then, of course, usually the coordinator ensures that training is in place for all of the stakeholders. So then, of course, the next step is inviting all the community stakeholders. And in doing that, it's, I mean, this is a process that, first of all, there needs to be a commitment to a protocol. That's even before one trains on the protocol. And so it's an opportunity to have honest discussion if there's any barriers to committing to the protocol, because sometimes there can be. I remember that we had to iron out some things with our communications with the RCMP. There were some issues about what they felt that they may not be able to uphold the protocol because of some issues around privacy. And so those are things that need to be talked about and ironed through. Once a commitment from the stakeholders is in place, then the next step is training on the protocol, and in the training, and I'm sure Will's going to talk about this more, but whenever, you can't just implement a community protocol, there always has to be in the context of training about suicide response, suicide assessment, suicide prevention. And I will come back to the issue of training a little bit later. And then, as I mentioned, arranging debriefing meetings when needed. I mean, if the protocol is implemented and everything just goes swimmingly, then you don't need a debriefing meeting. And then annual protocol meetings and trainings is required. And how I would handle that, say in Fort St. James, is I just chose September to be the timing of it, that every September I would send out an email to all the committed stakeholders, reminding them of the protocols, almost like a new year, particularly for us service providers, and also in that email reminding folks that if you have new personnel, please to orientate them in-house in the protocol, and if for some reason, and that new person could also come in contact with me and I would orientate them. So we're making sure that because there's lots of turnover in our positions, of course, and so oftentimes protocols fall down because it's not kept in the forefront of our practice, and some of that's just simply about turnover. And so the coordinator has that responsibility to ensure that they're catching that turnover, and then once a year at least, I would provide another opportunity to review the protocol as a group, all coming together. And sometimes that would be the first time that I would hear of a concern, or they would just make a request of a different change in our paperwork, etc. But also combine it with, again, updated suicide prevention and intervention training. So the next slide that's up is just one example, and I think that this, and I apologize, there's two slides because I couldn't fit the whole page on a slide, and tried not to make it microscopic for you. But just because we like things to be as streamlined as possible, like it to be as clear as possible, I would have a one-pager. So if we can go back a couple of slides, there would be a one page that would outline the actual protocol of, if it's possible to take the slides back, two. There we go. Thanks. So that people just, no, okay, one up,
One more forward.
one forward. So people can just eyeball it right away. They've had their conversation with the person who's at risk, and they've already come to a determination that they're low, medium, or high. And then they can just follow down step by step. What do I do? And this is so important to have it as clear as possible, because for all of us, it's a stressful situation when we really realize that someone's not safe enough. And we often start questioning our judgment, and you know, I swear it happens usually on your worst day. And so it's just, please try to keep, however, I don't think there's only one way to do a protocol. I really do think it needs to be community specific, but I would strongly advise sort of a one-page, very clear form. And so this is just reminding them of what to do. And as you can see, training is necessary. One of the steps, when someone's low, it says discuss safety plan. Well, of course, if you haven't had training and you're not sure what a safety plan is, then this means nothing, right? You can't just put a protocol in front of someone and think, oh, this is going to work. So in the training, you know, we discuss safety plan, we discuss no harm contracts, all this sort of thing. But so it leads someone through what they need to do, and then also not only what they're going to do on behalf of the person who isn't safe enough, but what is the communication process that they're going to follow for the protocol. Because one of the biggest reasons why we want to have protocols, particularly for children and youth, is that you want the circle that their circles that there's already involved in their lives, everyone to have the same information. And so that you have more eyes, more hearts open to that child and youth while they're at a risky time in their lives. That's the point. And if we can strengthen the circles around them, then we can minimize risk. For example, this Fort St. James protocol that's up on the screen right now, not only do the communication process is that, yes, all levels of risk, the form would be completed, we'll get to the form next, would be sent to me as the coordinator, or in the case of Splatsine, it would be sent to the health director, which was Crystal. But also in Fort St. James, it would also be sent, we had one community health unit, and so it would be sent to there, so that it was on file with the doctors. So if that individual in the next number of weeks had a doctor's appointment, that's information that the doctor can follow up on. But also it's flagged that, say the individual isn't talking about having been at risk recently, the doctor is just aware that, you know, depending on the level of risk, that it's probably wise not to give a lethal dose prescription at that time, particularly if the person's medium to high risk, you know, and so that guides the doctor's decision making in his or her treatment. And the form also went to the hospital. So they say 3 days later at 3 a.m. the person's at the hospital, may or may not be talking about the risk level they've been at, but the hospital would have the chance to look at this and go, okay, again, be able to have the conversation, you know, and the form would say, well, 3 days ago you were in conversation with so-and-so, at that time your risk was rated to be medium, you know, where are you at now? And so in that way, we are, that level of communication is we're minimizing risk. All right, so if we can go to the slide that says critical incident report. One more.
Right there, that's good.
There we go. Again, it does not have to look like this for you. It's up to you but you have a one-pager protocol, and then you have a one-pager report form, and up to you what it's going to include. But what we did is that we used something that would help people. Not only are they recording the work that they're doing, and this is the form that's going to go to the coordinator and perhaps to doctors and hospital, whoever you decide is part of that communication plan. But it also, you see that there's check boxes under high, medium, and low, is that people said, I don't want to just there was the feedback from people who were first responding. They wanted something to remind them of the things they needed to think about in terms of assessment. Something sort of quick and easy. So this is meant to be a report form, but as you see, there's check boxes around risk. So it just cued them, particularly again when you're in a stressful situation, that these are things that I'm paying attention to. And then you see the next section. So this is very hands-on, meant to be helpful to the first responder, because the next section is a safety plan checklist. Again, so you don't have to keep it all, forefront in your mind. It's like, okay, so you are engaging in safety planning with the individual. It's not that every box needs to be included as part of the safety plan. Safety plans are definitely geared towards every individual, but it, again, cues your memory of things that you might want to check in on is, okay, should this be part of this individual's safety plan? So, for example, if it is a minor, their parent and guardian needs to be informed that they're at risk, unless to do so would place them at higher risk. Is there a counselor involved? Has that person been informed? And you engage in safety planning with the person's consent. This is not something you impose on something. If it's not feeling like it's a fit or working for that person, then it's not really worth the paper it's written on. Okay.
Just one other thing about that form, Susan, that was also put in place to ensure that people were not falling between the cracks, that there was actually there's a follow-up plan. I think that's, a very important piece of, this suicide report or critical incident report.
Yeah, absolutely, because I think we were finding that people were falling through the cracks, or one person was aware of the risk, but all the caregivers of that person wasn't aware. And so then you also have sort of contradictory and sometimes competing interventions happening. So yes, it is about that, because it isn't enough to have, say, on today's Tuesday someone's identified at risk, and then no one ever follows up or engages in that conversation again with that person. One doesn't feel very cared for, right? And in fact, the risk does, we don't know. Risks don't stay the same. They're quite labile. And then after the safety plan checklist, there's an action plan. And again, that would depend on what level of risk. The higher level of risk, the greater degree of direct intervention we need. Obviously, if someone's at high risk, we don't send them home into a home that has weapons or lethal means that they just have access to. So there's practical things that need to be taken care of. And then the bottom is just that there's room for comments. And oftentimes that would be a good place to sort of to jot down about the person at risk, sort of where they're at in terms, are they resistant, are they engaged in help-seeking behavior, that sort of thing. That would be helpful to know. And then, of course, it's signed off, and even that is an opportunity. It's not just the person who is completing obviously the person who's completing the form signs, but there's a spot for a supervisor or the health director in Crystal's case, or myself to sign, which indicates that, yes, the communication has occurred. That's how we document that. So.
Next slide.
I think what I'd like to just pause right now, Crystal, and
okay.
Just ask for you to step in. And what was your experience as the coordinator in your community that hadn't had a protocol before? If you just want to talk about what that was like.
Okay, so as you know, Susan, some of our attempts in our youth actually were increasing, and of course, not having the clinical background, I didn't know what to do. What do you do when you're in a crisis situation? Everybody's running around, like even, people who are, are social workers are running around saying, this is happening, do something about it. And, everybody is running on high emotions. Nobody knew what to do, how to do it, who took the lead, who was to take the lead on it when you're going through the whole process. And of course, the youth or the person that's in crisis have their own mind on who they want to work with. So, that was kind of before the protocol. So post-protocol, or implementing and training everybody that we could that wanted to be trained on it, and there was a large number trained, it came to be, yes, we didn't want to get the phone call, but those phone calls do happen. It was, I kept these 2 pages posted to my bulletin board. There was a set in my car. So we're all operating. We began all operating under the protocol, that it stayed alive when we needed it. It was there. It was a usable tool that kept us going. Yes, because we're all driven by emotion, and we know that we all know each other in our communities, but the protocol gave us a process and direction, and our next steps. And we could do the follow-up. And a lot of times, which I credit Susan for, is a lot of it was diagnosis. You remove the alcohol, the drugs, the attempts. We were actually talking to the psychiatrists about diagnosis, holding also the medical field accountable to diagnosis. And in more than a few of our cases, the people are actually diagnosed, they're functioning, they're on regular medication. So the protocol actually opened the doors to other areas and opened that working relationship also with the mental health clinicians and psychiatrists in the hospital.
I thank you for saying that. Now I recall that piece, and it's an important sort of side benefit to having a protocol, is that, first of all the people who could be providing service, you're speaking the same language, and it can help get you at the front of the line in terms of being heard and advocating for either change in service or implementation of service for a community member. So that is a helpful piece. It does also eliminate, you alluded to it a little bit, I think, Crystal, particularly in our smaller communities where we all know each other. It eliminates that, it's just Billy. It's like, no, we use the protocol, we follow the protocol with everyone, every time. And so it eliminates that sort of assuming that we know where someone's at because we know their history or we know their family or whatever. And so I think it's a fairer response that way. It also helps to eliminate misunderstanding and miscommunication, where oftentimes without a protocol, there's sort of a perception that, Susie took care of it. But Susie actually only had 2 minutes of interaction with that person and didn't have the opportunity to do what was needed, but everyone thought that Susie had done it, right? And so it eliminates those sorts of misperceptions. So, okay. So this is just an example of, a slide that I would have up in a training when I'm orientating the community to their own protocol. So just a very brief summary of what does high risk mean, that there is a suicide attempt, that there's a plan and lethal means and no perceived supports. And then that not only do you implement the community suicide protocol, but in this case, because it's high, you're involving the medical system. And so you're either contacting emergency, or you're transporting to emergency, or you're getting someone to do a transport to emergency, you're contacting the family doctor, etc. The next slide. And then there's more detail. So this is just taken directly out of the Splat-Scene protocol, that if it was a high-risk situation, we arrange for immediate contact of the psychiatric emergency response team. So in that community, that was a resource that's available. In Fort St. James, that's not a resource. And so again, that's why it's tailored to every community or the RCMP, depending on what is appropriate. If that person's in your office, it's appropriate that it be a medical response. But if that person is in their own home, then it's appropriate that it be an RCMP response, because you don't know what the situation is that the people are walking into, and there could always be safety concerns. But the point is that you must have a guarantee that an individual is accompanied to the hospital. When someone's at high risk, it's not safe enough just to think that Johnny says, oh yeah, no, that's okay, I'll go straight there. Johnny gets in his car and takes a left turn instead of a right. You can't do that. So you have to make sure that someone who is reliable is accompanying that person to the medical supports that they need. Again, you will only do this if it's high risk. Then in this case, because it was the health director who was the key contact, who was the coordinator, is that report form is at the health director by the next business day, because she's going to ensure, again, that's where if there's any advocacy that's going to happen for services, it's going to happen through that person. It's that person who's going to implement a debrief if it's needed. It's that person who's going to ensure that there's follow-up. Again, if there's youth, then the caregivers are informed, and child welfare is only involved if the protection issue is identified. So, and that's a key piece that we clarified in the development of the protocols, having those conversations with child protection authorities, getting clear about when do you need to be informed, when do you not need to be informed, and getting that really hammered out. So no assumptions, letting them tell us what that looks like. Okay, next slide. And the next slide just indicates it starts to look a little bit different if there's medium risk. And that's where it's then at medium risk, there's more responsibility on the first responder, where you're getting clear communication with the person at risk, you're obtaining a commitment to not harm. Obviously, if someone cannot make that commitment, it moves up to high risk. Again, there is a communication to a variety of the people who are already involved, the circles of support in that person's life, and you're following up on counseling supports. And then the next slide is low risk. And this is where, not as much action is needed. There's suicide ideation. Yes, they are feeling helpless and hopeless, but they are able to recognize that they have supports in place. Not to be confused with, there's lots of supports in place, but if they're not recognizing that as support right now, due to black or white thinking, due to conflict, whatever, then it doesn't count, right? So they see it as supports. Then it is about, then you've got more breathing room, and you get to just communicate caring and explore the issues that are leading to this hopeless, helpless feeling. You're evaluating the supports, strengthening the supports, reporting to caregivers as well, particularly if it's a child or youth. Following up on counseling supports, a person clearly does need follow-up. This again can move up the spectrum, but there's not the same degree of level of action that's needed. And I have one final slide, and these are what I would do when I'm doing a community-based training, and whether that's like in the splat scene situation, we first trained chief and council. We trained all band personnel, but then we went out into the community and trained band members. And when we trained band personnel, also other stakeholders were invited. So in that case, there was a decision to train just about anyone who was willing to be trained. So it wasn't kept just to service providers. And I felt that in smaller communities like that, that was a really wise decision. That was Crystal's call to bring community members into the training, and that felt really appropriate. In Fort St. James, it was only service providers and stakeholders that we trained. Again, larger community, larger numbers, more diverse peoples. If I was taking it to an on-reserve community, absolutely, I would open it up to all interested community members, in addition to service personnel. And so what I include in the training is you're defining terms regarding suicide, again, being clear, because we want to use accurate language. We want to use clear language. It's quite a bee in my bonnet. I get quite aggravated if someone just says someone's suicidal, because I don't know if that means they have a gun to their head or if they have suicidal ideation. There's a big range of experience in that, so I'm quite forceful about we need to be clear in our terms and use specific terms so we know what we're dealing with. So that's part of the training. Ways of understanding suicide, like having a framework of understanding it, looking at incidence rates, and then getting very clear on what the levels of risk look like and how we do that assessment. The community protocol itself, risk assessments, no harm contracts. Not only what does that mean? How do you do that? How do you know that you have something that's actually worth something? So that's a process. And then safety planning. And again, how do you know that you've got something that you can actually feel some relief that's worth something? I've had so many people know that, particularly when they're in a hospital and they want out, that they just have to agree to a no harm contract and a safety plan. And they just know that's my ticket out. So they go, yep, but it means nothing. And so we're trying to avoid those sorts of processes because they're not worth much at all. So that's what I include in a one-day training. So that's community protocols in a really short period of time, and I'm just open to any questions, comments. Anything more you would like to add, Crystal?
I just want to say, Susan, it was a learning process through that when we were putting that together, and it did make my job in a tough situation and the communities, because a big piece of it, the one piece I did want to say is it was a surprisingly high number of people who didn't know that, even though it could be secret among best friends, where one who had suicide ideation and the second person, a lot was put on the second person, that when we brought the awareness to the community, to the school workers, that they realized that suicide is to be talked about and to share so that that person can get the help that they need. I guess I would like to add that piece to all the education that we did to all levels of the stakeholders, all levels of the community and the youth, that it opened a lot of doors for discussion. So it was no longer a secret. We were talking about it. If one youth displayed or talked about suicide, that it was okay for them to go get help. That is the one message that I want to say came from putting a suicide protocol in place, is the education was a tool to be used. We have a question?
Yeah, we have a question from one of our participants named Shannon on Adobe Connect, and Susan, I believe this is for you. And Shannon says, I'm wondering if you are aware of various similar programs and have connected with them. I am thinking of ASC, IRT, DPS, or even ASIST trained people that may be in the community.
Well, there's much suicide intervention and prevention training that is available, and there's also protocols in a variety of contexts, and so it's also incredibly easy to look at someone else's protocol and adapt it to one's own community. For example, like some school districts have their own protocol, and so that's a piece that has to be looked at if you are implementing a protocol. That's why that piece about needing to obtain a commitment to the protocol, sometimes you have to look at, well, is the protocol that's in existence at the school district, does that work for a community-wide protocol? Or, do we need to change a community-wide protocol but make it in such a way that's not going to conflict with the protocol that school personnel have to follow? So those are issues. Yeah, this is not creating something out of nowhere. So yeah, there's many different models, and there's lots of sources of community training, suicide training. Yeah.
Is there any questions on the video conference? Because we have another presenter coming on, but I want to make sure that we give, that we take a couple questions, if there's any.
Yeah, I just wondered if we could have some clarification on what she means by ways of understanding suicide.
Well, there's a medical model of understanding suicide that sees it as a psychopathology. And there is it was written by someone from within a First Nations community that really sees it from a strengths-based perspective and a normal response to an overwhelming pain. And I present those very different frameworks in a training because one can see that the framework that you hold is going to mold your response to this issue. And it's not a value judgment. It's not ever saying, well, one is right and one is wrong. That's not it. But it's an understanding that, and then it's an opportunity to sort of examine one's own framework, because that is going to very much impact your own response to this issue.
Okay, we're going to take another question. We'll be able to field some more questions at the end of the presentation because I want to make sure we get over to Vancouver Island. We do have one more question from Adobe Connect, and it asks, can you talk about how you assess whether or not there's a child protection issue with regard to suicide prevention?
Okay, I'll respond to that from the context of the conversations that we had in Fort St. James, but my disclaimer is that this is a conversation that each community would need to have with their respective child protection agency. Okay, so that's my disclaimer. But basically what MCFD in Fort St. James told us was that as long as the primary caregiver was able to accept that there was a risk and respond appropriately, be an engaged part of a safety plan, then we're good. But if that person, due to their own issues, due to denial, whatever, was resistant to, or say the youth absolutely refused to have their caregiver be informed, then that's a potential child protection concern, and we needed to involve the ministry. And I'm not saying, and what happened the few times that we did that, I just want to say that no one was ever actually removed from their homes, but the ministry did get involved to get some collaterals involved to make sure that there was some responsible adult in place in that child's immediate circle. Okay. Mm-hmm. So,
okay.
But that was not work that we did at that point. So if we, if you had a parent who just, well, as I say, it's clear if the child or youth refuses, but if you had a parent who hung up on you or just said, oh, be fine, whatever, or you couldn't find a caregiver, then you had to get a hold of MCFD in that case, in that community.
All righty. Thank you, Susan. Thank you for the questions. What I'm going to do now is the last speaker actually kind of led us into the next speakers, our next panel, strength-based response, community response. Now the group, hopefully you had opportunity to view their video clip off of the local Vancouver Island news. They did receive some coverage from the local media, but strength-based community response, there is a group formed on Vancouver Island encompassing the Saanich Nation. I'll turn the floor over to Will and the Gathering Strength programs to further explain what they did in their communities around suicide and suicide prevention and what they continue to do. Will?
Hello.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I just wanted to start off by saying thank you to Susan for the presentation. It's very valuable information that we'll be using. If I'm yelling, then can you let me know if I'm being too loud? I'm just going to do a quick round of introductions. As was mentioned before, my name is William Morris. I'm from the Morris family from Saanich on South Vancouver Island.
My name is Max Henry, Saanich Nation.
I'm Bonnie Joe from Stay Out First Nation.
I'm Wayno Sam from Stay Out First Nation.
And I'm Becky Wilson from Stay Out First Nation.
Evelyn Morris from Stay Out First Nation.
I just wanted to make sure that the entire Gathering Strength team was here. More of the spokesperson. Each of us carries our own ideas and community focus for the Gathering Strength initiative. Gathering Strength is it was an initiative that started back in April of this year, so we've been together for about 8.5 months now. The way we like to refer to ourselves is Kwamkwamsit. It's through our Sinchothan squel. It's Sinchothan language. It means to gather strength. And it was actually based on a need in the community. We don't actually have an assert team or a model in our community to handle this sort of prevention. We're currently not a funded organization, as I mentioned. This is actually off the side of our desks. I'm the hub coordinator, and each of our team members here has a different job throughout the Saanich territories. As the hub coordinator, through planning, communication, and collaboration within the healthcare for our member nations, that's an initiative through the First Nations Health Authority. And our vision right here as the Gathering Strength is to help our people now, in the immediate future, and in the long term in the areas of prevention, intervention, and postvention. That's very important to us. We took the initiative because we refused to be another report that's going to sit on somebody's shelf and it's going to gather dust. We actually wanted to be in the community, making a difference. And we took on this initiative because we wanted to have something available for our people after 4:30 on Friday afternoon, and between 4:30 on Friday and 8:30 Monday morning. That's when a lot of our incidents happen. Yeah. We're looking at mental health, depression, addictions, and other struggles in our community that aren't necessarily our fault. They're residual feelings passed on through intergenerational experiences from the residential school system, which was imposed on our people. We do focus on the community-driven, nation-based, as was mentioned. We are from Saanich, but each of us is from different villages throughout the Saanich territory. One of the things that we're really proud of in terms of our group is it's a teaching that comes from our elders. We started a mentoring group in order to offset some of the experiences that we've had, and the teaching is that we cannot really help others if we can't even help ourselves. So we've started a mentoring group that meets bi-weekly in order to address some of our own concerns. At this point in time, just since we've started, we've collaborated together, and we've had a direct impact in getting counseling services or referrals in depression or addictions, mental health, a lot of it in the area of prevention and intervention for 50 people within our territory. It's a staggering statistic when we think about what was available before our initiative was here. To be honest, there wasn't a great deal in terms of intervention for suicide. I will be getting into the PowerPoint presentation a little later, but I'll mention some of the things that we have going on right now. We did start a basketball program here in Sayout, where all Saanich Nation members are welcome, in partnership with Eli Pasquale. We did start a swimming program where we're teaching some of our kids to get into just the basics. We already have identified 3 individuals that are close to moving into a training scenario where they're actually going to become lifeguards. We did start a boxing program in partnership with Capital City Boxing and Chris Jones of Capital City Boxing. There's a cool story for that one. We did have some individuals from one of our communities that was posting some fights, and we did manage to recruit some of those youth into our program. Some of the future camps that we'll be getting into include soccer, paddling, lacrosse is the big one. I'll get into that in the PowerPoint presentation, and of course cross training. We're not strictly focused on sports. These are some of the things that we'll be working on in the future that include art classes. We've made contacts with back to school. We have a number of youth that need to get back into school, so we're making contacts with the local high schools and other areas to get some of our kids back into school, so we're focused on education. Another one that's going to be in partnership with the local RCMP is going to be local RCMP and municipal police's gun safety and the traditional hunting program. And we're also in talks of establishing our own youth group where we're not necessarily driving, we're actually gathering the youth together and organizing a community-based youth program. We do have bracelets, blue bracelets that are for sale. All proceeds go towards training, event planning, and offset costs for equipment. When you buy the bracelets, like I said, it says Quamquamsit and gathering strength on the bracelets. In the spring, we are looking at a youth conference, a gathering strength youth conference. It's still in the development stage. To be honest, we're searching for funds.
Another proposal is gone out.
And we do constantly send out proposals, and if you have any contacts, please let me know. Anything to add?
All in the PowerPoint.
Yeah. We do actually have some, we call it swag. There's pens, there's water bottles, there's bags, there's all kinds of stuff that we have. Each of the participants in our camps now have, I don't know, just materials that we can hand out to them, just to let them know that we're thinking of them and to continue on in their healthy lifestyles. I'll be getting into further about the, oh yeah, we've got some towels too. We are going to be getting into youth cultural exchanges. If anyone's interested, please contact myself or any member of the team here. We're looking at local, provincial, and actually nationwide. And go ahead.
I had one thing to add to. A huge part of our group that we wanted to mention is that we didn't want to be one and done, because there's been a lot of programs for our people that have come along and kind of did one dinner or one event essentially, and that was it, and the community never heard or seen from any of those, I want to say, organizations or people.
Yeah.
So
Okay, from there I'm just going to get into the PowerPoint presentation that we put together for our local communities. Okay, can you turn the light on? I'll let you get there first.
Yeah. Or, I don't know. Okay.
Okay. Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, this is our Gathering Strength initiative. This is a picture of our inspiration. It's sandwich number 5. Picture here is of some of our ancestors in some of our war canoe races. This is the logo for the hub. The South Island Hub is about planning, collaboration, and communication. There's our Gathering Strength logo. It's graciously donated by master artist Perry LaFortune of Husseinich. Our beautifully crafted Saanich Guardian protects the house of the Kwilnook people. We're both indebted and honored to our guardians, yet understand our role to help our families during their time of need. Here's a picture of our team, minus Emmy. We recently, back in October, went to the national conference. Is the CASP national conference in 2012 is called
Canadian Association for Suicide Prevention.
And the title of the conference was called Coming Out of the Darkness. Stepping Out of the Darkness, sorry. Our strength is still building. We do have every intention of carrying on the work of our ancestors.
Suicides in there.
Our goals are to contribute to the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual health and wellness of our communities in a holistic way and in a culturally sensitive manner. There's always something to learn, and there's always something to contribute. Our losses in terms of suicide prevention and awareness. Each of us, members of the team, has experienced extremely difficult, life-changing losses that we choose to use as inspiration and a source of healing. The idea that one is too many. Just to get into a statistic that we learned at the CASP conference, nationally, 10 people per day, on average, attempt suicide. That's the equivalent to a football stadium full of people that are perfectly preventable. And our focus, like I said from the beginning, as Max coined the phrase, a one and done approach isn't the way to go. Many things that happen in our communities, we get partners that'll come in and do a quick presentation, this is what you got to do, and then leave. It's up to us to take the initiative, and that's our approach. From day one, we said that support will be limited and opposition will be common, and those not for us will be usually against us. So unity and collaboration is needed to achieve success. I'll go back one. Okay, sorry about that. This is a community dinner that we did back in May. This is our first event. It took us about a month to put together. It was very well attended. The people that you see at this event, in that picture, are members of our committee and the leadership from our 4 communities. We're very thankful to have this event because not often do we see all the leaders together in one place, and we can tell that that's very important for our leaders and our community members. These were our challenges for our event. Money being one, obviously. The timing, because it was so close to some of the losses in our communities. We were a little afraid. That gets into the strength and support. We were very, very nervous. We did not have a great deal of guidance in terms of putting an event together. At that point in time, there wasn't a great deal of support in the community. Of course, traditional belief, that's when we get into having the inability to actually talk about suicide prevention and awareness. We did not have the capacity, as was stated earlier, we do not have one person focused strictly on suicide in the Saanich communities. This is a community-driven process, and political unity. Okay. I'll just skip that. Okay, these are some of the success stories. There are others in and amongst themselves, but the suicide ideology training with Bev Williams back in June, we had about 20 participants. The Gathering Strength Police Day in partnership with Central Saanich Police Department and Sydney RCMP, we had about 60 participants from the local communities. We did some training moving from hopelessness to power with Shane Baker back in July. The assist training is very new to us. It took place from July, August, and September. We have a number of Saanich trained participants. As I mentioned earlier, the CASP conference, Coming Out of the Darkness, is a national conference in Niagara Falls. It's very well attended, but is lacking in terms of Aboriginal content, and it's something that we're focusing on hopefully for the 2013 in Winnipeg. And of course, while we were in Niagara Falls, we were recruited to make a presentation at Brock University in Ontario as to our success stories, and it was very well received by members of staff of the university and students as well. Okay. Our successes continued. Our invitation to present Gathering Strength at the next CASP conference, it'll be in Winnipeg in 2013. This gets to the community-driven process that we're focusing on. We have been invited to Snuneymuxw, relatives in Snuneymuxw, to present the same ideas. Of course, today, the UBC Learning Circle, and thank you, Auntie Crystal, for that. Our bracelet sales are ongoing and successful, and then the Brock University presentation. These are some of the things that I mentioned already. The Gathering Strength Eli Pasquale basketball camp, the Gathering Strength boxing camp, swim camp, Gathering Strength Saanich United soccer camp. We will be taking more assist training. Actually, some of our members will be taking the assist training tomorrow and Thursday. One of the things that we will be establishing hopefully in the new year is a trauma team of all known assist-trained community members in our Saanich territory. We will be hosting a lunch in January. Here's a slide for our boxing camp. It takes place at the Seo Gymnasium, and this has been very well attended for boys and girls, anywhere from, we said 10 and up, but we've had kids as young as 6 and 7, and adults as old as 50 plus. Go ahead. The basketball camp with Eli Pasquale. This took a little while to get off the ground, I think because of timing and transportation, but it's been very successful. Our last camp is actually taking place today at the Seo Gymnasium. Go ahead. Our swim camp, as I mentioned earlier, with Panorama Recreation. In partnership with Panorama, they actually donated, I think it was a grant of almost $500 to help us with this process. Our struggle has been capacity, and actually there's a couple of success stories. There are 3 that I know of, members of this group that plan on moving on to the lifeguard stage. Okay. This presentation is geared for our own community, so we are looking to help, but we're always looking for new ideas. We're dynamic, and we want to evolve with the times. We don't, like I said, we don't want to be a report on somebody's shelf somewhere. We want to be in the community doing the work and making that difference that we have to. These are our hopes. To actually have some of our members trained as lifeguards, as swim instructors, to give them a healthy opportunity to lend a hand in their own communities. Okay. Our strength. This is a picture of Aboriginal boxer Mary Spencer. She's actually toured Capital City Boxing. And this is our hope for some of our Saanich youth, some of the participants in our community. Yeah. It's our relative from Cowichan Tribes. This is something that we're very proud of too. We would like some of our participants to reach the elite level in terms of participating in all sports. There's a picture of Christine Sinclair of Team Canada. A lot of Saanich youth are into soccer, so this is one of the things that we want them to strive to be. Okay. And of course, from the interior, Carey Price of the Montreal Canadiens. We do want, again, some of our youth are into floor hockey. Our struggles here are ice time. We do have kids that are interested in ice hockey, but we don't have the capacity to take that next step. But these are some of the things that we want our kids to strive for. When we set out from day one, we did say that the camps aren't just a one and done approach. We actually want to lead up to something. The camps leapfrog into the different leagues, different training facilities and programs that are available here in our communities. Our own Saanich games that will be hopefully in the summer, next summer, that's our plan. Our local Coast Salish, the Coast Salish games that take place in the Cowichan Tribes area. And eventually at the national level, and of course North American Indigenous games. Yeah. These are some of the things that are coming for our Gathering Strength team. These are ideas that we have that we're moving on our own. Bringing our own Saanich games. These are some of the pictures from the Coast Salish games, but these are some of the things that we can do now here in our own community. War canoe racing on the left, floor hockey and soccer. These are activities that we do have planned for the Saanich Games that'll take place in the summer of 2013. This is a picture of our Six Nations relatives, friends. There's an interesting story with this. When we were there, one of our team members had the opportunity to meet some of the people there, and what we learned is that this team that you see pictured here actually lost one of their members between games 2 and 3 of a provincial level final, of a 7-game provincial level final. Very difficult. We shared the same or similar experiences here in our community, and it was a very beneficial meeting with members of the Six Nations Arrows lacrosse team. One of the things that's going to be happening in the future is that in our travels, we did manage to become partners with the organization back east, and they will be sending some of their elite level lacrosse players to come out to the West Coast and teach some of our Saanich youth some coaching skills and fundamentals of the game. So it's very, very exciting for our own committee and our youth in the community. Okay, this one is very personal. The Gathering Strength app, we haven't announced a date for release of this. Everybody and their cousin has iPhone or smartphone, and there are always apps available. And one of the things that we're looking at in developing right now is a useful iPhone or smartphone application for people in difficult situations that have the basics when it comes to like embracing life protocols or the assist model protocols right at their hands. Each of us on the team has gone through intervention in the last 8 months where we could have used a smartphone app rather than dig around for a piece of paper or try and remember every step. So this is one of the things that we're developing at this point in time.
Cool. It's a great idea.
Yep. As I mentioned earlier, we are developing our own trauma outreach team in terms of gathering strength. We will be hosting a meeting in the new year in January to contact the list of people. There's more than 20 Saanich people that have had the assist training, and we're looking at continuing with further training in suicide prevention, critical incidents, group debriefing, and other areas. Our dinner back in May of this year had a healing feeling, and one of the things that we're focusing on is an athlete recognition dinner. A lot of our athletes and leaders develop skills in our community through sports, and it's important, I think, to reflect on those achievements. This is a picture of Saanich United that I'm actually one of the coaches for this team. Very exciting story. Gord Elliott, member of the Sartlup Chief and Council, and myself got together in our traditional territory when many of these men that you see pictured here could not be in the same room with each other, even though you either wore a blue shirt or you wore a red shirt. We came together, combined our teams, and we've had many successes in terms of the sport. But it's not only on the field success, it's off the field. The community's been much safer and much friendlier. So it's a huge success story, and we're looking to highlight that in our athlete recognition dinner in the spring of 2013. Yep. We will be taking further assist training. That'll be on a TBA and next question. Next one. We will be doing this presentation, actually a better presentation than this, hopefully, in Winnipeg in 2013. That's a picture of our team with Sherry from Six Nations. She's our contact there, and we're hoping to do a cultural exchange with Six Nations. We are in the development stages of an interactive workshop. A lot of our youth don't actually understand why are we in this situation we're in? Why do we feel so desperate? And we are in the process of developing an interactive workshop to help them understand, to help educate ourselves and others about our struggles in our communities. Yeah. We do have a youth group in the development stages. Again, what I mentioned earlier is that we do have our regular day jobs, and then when we finish work, we have to go and take care of gathering strength camps as well. So our only day of the week that's available is Friday, so we're targeting our youth groups to meet on Friday. That's a work in progress as well. Okay. Our camp demographics up until now, we've actually had more than 110 Saanich people out, plus some visitors from other territories. Our youngest is 5, our oldest is 45 and over. As I mentioned, there are still other sports coming, and there will be other activities. There are entire groups of people that we're still leaving out. We're targeting youth at this point, but we will be developing further activities for other demographics in our community. We're doing well, but what about the young adult, senior, and elders groups that must be addressed? And we must not discriminate. Okay.
Yeah. Will?
Yeah. Yeah.
We have a question. Mine is
okay.
Not very well.
Actually, it's not really a question, it's more of a comment, and it's from Shannon Stewart on Adobe. Let me just pull it up here, because I think it's a really great comment. She's got some great ideas here. She says, perhaps looking at piggybacking on the Gathering Our Voices conference that is already happening in the spring, perhaps you could add a day to it, or even offer to host a portion. They also fund kids to attend. And it's here in beautiful Silex territory in Penticton. So just thought I'd put that out there, sorry. Felix?
Okay, it's something that we have looked at in the past, and I appreciate the comment. We will look into it. Our difficulty at this point in time is, like I said, capacity. I don't know, we might just jump on a van and show up there. But we're doing the best that we can with our limited resources. You can go to the next. Yeah. At this point in time, we are collaboration at its finest. Our success rate is, well, we don't have an exact percentage, but it's pretty good. We like to thank Nishtoa. These are some of our partners. Nishtoa, Child and Family Services, Sale First Nation and their health department, Sarlup First Nation and their health department, Sycom First Nation and Pakwachin First Nation, Husainich, the Saanich Native Support Program, Sydney RCMP, VIHA, and South Island Wellness. Okay, you go to the next one. Okay, I am looking for suggestions. Again, this is normally for our community members, this presentation, but I am looking for, I'm listening to any comments and concerns. This is a community-driven and community-based initiative. This program is for the use and benefit of all of us, so suggestions are welcome.
Is there any cultural events that you do?
We are actually in the process of developing this. I did mention, in partnership with Sydney RCMP and Central Saanich Police, gathering strength in the Department of National Defence. It's a hunting program, and we are in the process of developing some cultural camps for the springtime. Again, we're doing the best that we can, and capacity is our struggle. Okay.
Have you ever tried drumming and singing dancing groups?
I didn't want to let the cat out of the bag, but it is an initiative that we've been looking at for some time. We are in the process of finding someone to take the lead on that. It might just end up being one of us, but we're stretched pretty thin at this point in time, and we are looking at it at this point in time, probably for the new year.
Okay, cool.
Okay. Okay, that's it. Turn the light on.
Top secret anymore.
Will?
Yeah.
I do have a question, and it's probably kind of a two-part question, and I think that's what Elder Hedworth is trying to get to ask here. With regards to your smartphone application, is there a time frame that you're looking at rolling that out, and will you be able to, as your Gathering Strength Committee, expand that out and circulate the application and the details to the schools, universities, and First Nations Authority programs?
We have a meeting. We have a meeting on Thursday with First Voices, the developers for the First Voices application that they recently launched as well. So we'll know more after tomorrow, and we can get more information to you guys then.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Elder Hedworth. Does that answer your question, Elder Hedworth? Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay. Well, that's our presentation for today. I'm not sure if there's any other questions or...
Is there any questions on video conference? Stephen, can we flip it to all the other rooms as well, please? While Stephen's working on that, I just want to say, something, Will, when we we began talking about this, that the work that you and the Gathering Strength Committee has done over there, how you talked about something good coming from a struggle that in many First Nations communities and families that we have all experienced, that I do hold my hands up to you. You know, it's really hard not to get emotional when you listen to how much commitment and drive that your team and, you know, the endless number of hours that you have put into this initiative. And I really do hold my hands up to all of you because, you know, Will, you and I have a personal relationship, and hearing your successes, and I'm proud to say that, you know, you are all doing a wonderful job over there. It's a lot of work, a lot of dedication, and pulling together like you did as a nation, and wanting something better for your children and your grandchildren and the generations to come, and supporting those who are struggling and helping them, giving them options to choose, and not only looking at the younger youth, but also moving forward and including your adults, because we realize that these types of events happen to young teenagers all the way up to elders. We've seen that in other communities. So right now I'm going to open up the floor. Is there any questions or comments from any of the other sites that are on video conference?
Question.
Yes, go ahead.
So basically what I'm asking from the panels that have already spoken is with the recent TRC and everything, the deadlines that have passed, just strategies on including the survivors and their families in regards to suicide prevention, and any strategies that have been happening within the nations.
Anything else? The events that we host.
The main reason.
Okay, I'm just having a quick information session with the team here. It has been a struggle for sure for members of our communities when it came to the TRC and coming into our communities and hosting the events, but no resources. Some of the things that we're working on are the mentorship group. We will be expanding that at another level. We have been focusing not strictly on suicide, but the causes of, and how can we deal with those feelings in and amongst our community members. So there are community circles available. I know SAOT hosts a Life Ring. There are other opportunities to be heard, but we don't have a specific strategy in place at this point in time. Like I said, we are stretched pretty thin dealing with the youth, but it's something that we will definitely be taking a look at in the new year.
Susan, do you have any response?
Well, I have one question and then one response. What does TRC stand for?
The Truth and Reconciliation.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Okay.
The only thing that I would add is that each time, no matter where one provides the training or is raising this issue, is just to acknowledge that for all of us, we have been personally impacted by this issue, and that it's really so important to create a safe enough space when we are having these conversations. They are triggering. They do bring up our grief and loss, and I find that needs to be acknowledged and named, and to monitor what's happening in the room. Like even if your intent is a professional, you're reaching out to professionals. All of us have been impacted, and so that someone is available to provide some support if someone's not. That is overcome by by the emotions that it is raised. I do find by just a respectful acknowledgement of that, that it helps. But whether, I think that people have to be in a certain place in their healing journey before they can even be in the room. That's difficult to have those conversations when you've been directly impacted in a group context. So, yeah.
Okay. Thank you. We do have a question on Adobe Connect. Oh boy, I lost it. Can you read it? Do you have it there? Mine keeps going down. Okay. Are there, Sue Ward asks, are there things that non-Aboriginal people from outside your community can do to support you and the team?
Come and support us and get to know our community.
I think when we do host events like the dinner in the springtime, that's an open door for community members. We do constantly look for funding. Like I said, we do have bracelet sales, and we take donations as well. But just be aware of the things that our community are consistently struggling with, and educate others in and amongst the community. That would help us a great deal. We don't have any other events besides the dinner in the springtime. Maybe support with the conference, and go ahead.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
And then just bodies to help out with volunteers.
I think we're just talking about the conference that's going to be happening in the spring as well, and then we do struggle for help when it comes to transportation and the like. There would be a process we'd have to put each volunteer through in the safety, and just thinking about the safety of our youth. So there would be a process that we would have to go through. So just be in contact with any member of the team, and we could find something for you to do.
Okay. We do have another question on Adobe, which is a very important question, and I know Susan and I, when we were looking at implementing the suicide protocol, it's William, you and your team, what you're doing so much for the Saanich communities. What are you doing for self-care to keep the gas tank full, so to say, so to speak?
Well, that's what he said. They have a mentoring program.
We do have a mentoring group that we take part in bi-weekly. That's where we go and take the experiences that we have had and talk about maybe a strategy for the next time, if hopefully it never happens again, but strategies that each of us can learn from. On top of that, we do make time. There's a gym here in Sayout. I like to go hang out with my wife and kids, go hunting, fishing, different sports activities. We do the best we can when we can, and I know members of the team do pick up the slack. So we do take time for ourselves. Thank you.
I guess I'd like to add to that, and I know Susan and I talked about this, the importance of self-care and the clinical supervision and support when it comes to dealing with some of the emotions that go with this. And I guess where I sit in a position now for the UBC Learning Circle and things of that nature is moving also topics forward that are emerging and supporting you further and supporting your team. And definitely in my discussions with different people, whether it's the First Nations Health Authority or First Nations Inuit Health, that there should be clinical support offered, because there's a lot of work that you're doing in your communities, and I will definitely be advocating for clinical support, and I'll have that discussion with you, William, because I think that piece is important for you and all the teams.
We do at this point in time have Sayout. Sayout has 3 counselors available, and Chris is one of the counselors here. He's leading the mentorship group. He's He's a counselor here.
Traditionally.
Okay.
We do also undertake different traditional activities. Something that we can't really share on online, but we do take care of ourselves using our own family traditions as well.
Thank you.
Okay.
Is there any other questions out there? I want to engage with some of the other communities that might have questions or comments. No. Is there any more comments that you would like to share, Will, or any of the other team members? Thoughts?
Anybody?
You've built quite the momentum. Sorry, go ahead.
I think I just wanted to thank each of the members of the team here for their continued effort. I know this is supposed to be just for me presenting today, but I felt moral support and members of the team each carry our own responsibilities, and it's important to acknowledge each and every member of the team. This isn't Will's Gathering Strength, it's the Saanich Gathering Strength initiative. So that's what we're focused on.
Okay. I guess what I would like to do is definitely thank all of you. Thank Susan from Carrier-Sakani Family Services. Thank you to the Gathering Strength team for participating today. I'll give one more opportunity for anybody else online. I can't see anybody waving their hands right now if they have any questions. Comments? Oh, wait, we do.
One more comment?
Oh, yes, sure. You can, sure, Susan.
Well, just in that question around self-care, I just wanted to let people know another plug for a community-based protocol is that people who are on the front lines have told me that they felt really supported by having a protocol, and that it took the issue. They actually felt that they had a web of support around them when they were interacting one-on-one with someone at risk, and that they felt that it wasn't all on their shoulders anymore, and that was quite a relief. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you, Susan. We do have another question. I can see you down in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen.
Yes, I was just wondering, I guess the question is for Susan. Just some suggestions regarding here on the west coast of Vancouver Island, we have regions where emergency services such as RCMP and ambulance service is sometimes for an ambulance is about an hour away, with RCMP being 4 hours away. I was just wondering if there's any suggestions based on rural setting where a strategic plan or a protocol would address issues like that.
Yeah. When it's high risk, that certainly gets scary, and I would. I know that what's happened in other situations is that a protocol, sort of a secondary protocol, was put in place about who from, usually from band council, would be, or band personnel, would be the identified person to provide transportation. Or if that person couldn't provide transportation, to be on site with the individual until that hour or 4 hour time allotment went by, and typically having then 2 people on site just to minimize any safety concerns. It is problematic if you have someone who is highly distressed, maybe substance using. We don't know whether they're having psychosis or whatever, and we understand that it's a risky situation for staff to potentially be involved in, and so it's conversations that need to happen with band personnel, because usually there are safety protocols in place for when you are entering into situations like that, particularly for any of us who do outreach work. But it is important for that person who is at risk not to be alone while they're waiting for those emergency responses. It's almost like you're balancing need, eh? You've got concerns around safety of your responder and concerns around safety of the individual who's at risk. What I'd be interested in knowing your thoughts of. Obviously, you've been living in that context for some time where you can't be fully reliant on emergency services. What happens right now?
I think what happens in the community is that there is a first responder team which work together. So I guess what my question for suggestion would be just for us as a tribal council to support any community initiatives that are there. I know that what our workers are in and out of the community, clinical counselors, cultural support, nursing, our own child protection services. So I guess the suggestion would be just to, from the point of a service provider at the nation level, just to support the community, I'm guessing at this point. But it is like a 4-hour wait for RCM to respond to any sort of situations in some of our remote communities, only accessible by sea or air.
Yeah. Well, I think that's an invaluable resource. If you do have a community-based first responder team, then yes, they're going to be a key component of your protocol. I'm a big fan of having as much community-based as possible in terms of response, even for the critical incident debriefing afterwards and those sorts of things for situations that are problematic.
Church.
Would be educating, I think.
The church?
I don't know, educating, like, because he's talking from the chief and council level. I would say it would be more educating, like knowing what that protocol is and where that go-to is, you know, and that being at the forefront so everybody's aware of what that is.
And that's why there's a comment that there's many samples of protocols, good protocols, but they have to be tailored to each and every community.
Yeah.
This isn't a one-stamp-fits-all approach.
So, we did have a question before I ran out of time. Sorry. Will, about the PowerPoint presentation, somebody was asking if they could have a copy of that, and if that could be made available, or is that kind of just that not allowed?
I don't mind. I forwarded a copy. I forwarded a copy to UBC Learning Circle. It's available there.
Okay, we will make sure that gets posted for anybody that would like that information, as well as, are we okay to circulate your contact information if people have further questions and want to be in contact with you directly?
Absolutely.
Okay, perfect. And I just want to remind people that we do welcome feedback here at the UBC Learning Circle. We're growing, we're learning. If we could actually, before people sign off, in each of the rooms, can you turn your speakers on one by one and let us know how much you are? The bottom left-hand corner, can you turn your speaker on and let us know how many people are in the room? Unfortunately, our funding is based on numbers and participation, so we're lacking in capturing our numbers and participants. So can we start at the bottom left-hand corner?
I don't know where.
And NTC, I believe. I can barely see. How many do you have in your room?
4.
Thank you. Second square in at the bottom, there's a lady there in the green shirt. I can't
Hi,
see
we
who
have
you
2.
are.
We're VCANs.
VCANs? Oh, VCANs? Okay, thank you.
2 people.
Okay, going up to Penellicott Health. How many do you have in your room?
Hi, we have 4.
Thank you. PHSA, Provincial Health Service Authority. How many is in your room?
Is that us?
Yes, that's you. Sorry.
We had 6 people in our room, but we also have a, we're wondering, Susan, if we could get a copy of your PowerPoint.
Fine.
And also, I have a question for Guy Prince. I was just wondering, it's Ruth Johnny here, Guy. Just wondering if you are putting on any drum and dance camps in the spring, because I'm interested in that for my youth group.
Yakuche's doing a dance on the 20th that we're going to be a part of that, and we're currently working in Takla right now, helping one of the frontline workers there to put together a drum and singing dance group.
Cool.
Okay, well, what I'm looking for is someone to come in March for a week and teach my youth more drumming and dancing skills. That's what I'm looking for. Wondering if
Where are
you were
you now,
available.
Ruth?
I'm actually living in Mackenzie, and I'm working for McLeod Lake Indian Band as their youth and recreation coordinator.
Yeah, you know what? Facebook me.
Okay, I'll do that.
Facebook me, Ruth. Ruby
Facebook
will
is
do.
Okay, thank you. Holcomb Mainham, how many did you have in your room?
2.
2. Is ONA still there, or PIB still there? I can't see all of you, so I'm trying to guess here. Stephen, can you help me out and tell me who else is in the room? Stephen is our wonderful. Okay.
3 corners.
How many in 3 corners?
Here.
Did you get that? Sorry, could you repeat that? You cut out. Sorry.
Okay, there were 2 at 3 corners.
Thank you.
1 in slamming.
1 in slamming. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Wolfpack and Slam.
Okay. Stephen, is there anybody else in our room that we're missing? Stephen is our tech support at First Nations Inuit Health. I guess while he's circulating the bottom in the rooms around, I just want to remind you we do welcome feedback. Any future ideas of circles, UBC learning circles or youth circles, we're open to those ideas. And further directions, if you have speakers you'd like to see at the UBC Learning Circle or Youth Circle. Networking, we really appreciate you forwarding our emails that we send out to you. You're more than welcome to do that. We have the capabilities of connecting up to, there's 100 video conference units across the province in addition to 200 standalone computers. I believe today we were at somewhere at the most 52 or just under 50. In addition to that, for today's session, I really want to thank our speakers on Vancouver Island and up in the north. I appreciate the time that you've all taken out of your busy schedules to come together for today's presentation. And as well, in the future, what we're looking at, just to keep in the back of your minds, that for the Youth Circle, we have an e-mentoring program coming on December 6th. And the e-mentoring is an online career mentoring program for Aboriginal youth using the internet. The mentees, which are the students from grades 6 to 12 across the province of BC, they're matched with mentors from UBC and across the province in the health sciences program, who those mentors are 100% dedicated to helping the students figure out what they want and how to get there. E-mentoring online platform gives mentors and mentees a chance to meet, and despite the geographical distances. December 12th, we have from the Secwépemc Nation, Indigenous role model Trevor Mack. He just did wonderful in the ice games over the weekend. It was awesome. I only got to see some of the replays, and I think his mom was online today. I'm just so proud of him. He's Chilcootin from Williams Lake. He's a writer and award-winning director and filmmaker. He calls himself a storyteller. Trevor's Get Up and Move and public service announcement recently won the 5,000 through the First Nations Health Authority. That was 2 years ago. And his active spirit, he also placed second. He currently attends the Motion Picture Arts program at Capilano University in Vancouver, North Van, where he is pursuing his bachelor's degree. So we're really promoting Indigenous and First Nations coming to our youth circle. We also are spotlighting school districts and catching our youth doing good things. So we're doing highlighting Coquitlam School District. Their topic is Play It Forward, where the organization was co-funded by Aboriginal students who have made it a mission to collect and donate sports equipment for school-aged children in other Aboriginal communities. And we will have 2 students joining us from that district along with their resource teacher speaking about their initiatives. In January, which was just confirmed today, we actually have Gino Ojic on speaking on bullying and his move to the city and his professional career in the NHL. So again, we're open to any ideas and feedback around our youth circles. So again, thank you from downtown Vancouver for joining us today. And yes, I look forward to seeing you over the next couple of months. Thank you.
Thank you, Crystal.
Thank you.
Thank you, Will.
Thanks, Will. Thanks, Susan. Hi, Chika, both of you. All of you. You can see me, I can't see you. I'm sorry.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.